Last week we had a forest fire that burned down half of a house in my village. This week we have government warnings of heavy rain with possible flooding. The rain has come, so I guess if there is going to be a flood, there will be ash at my door from the hill that burned down. It's the end of time, there ain't no rest for the wicked, so I'm gonna spend the next half hour discussing a murder mystery starring Selena Gomez because what else makes sense at this point? First of all, shout out to Nerd at Night, I think that's how you say it, for sharing my video to his followers last week. I think that's the reason the algorithm finally pushed my videos to the only murders in the building community in YouTube. Thank you. I will leave a link for his channel in my description. Go watch his videos. There's a lot of information and discussion about possible theories of who the murderer is. We are going to once again use one of Charles's boards. Because why make my own when the show already gives me so much material? This time we're using the who, how, why, and why now. Why is that funny to me? The main suspects for this episode are the sisters, the writer, and Bev Mellon. Before going into any of this, I'm going to say from the starting point that I don't think either of these people did it. I know there's the footprint, we will get there, but I don't think they did it simply because of the way this show has been structured since the beginning. We never really get any deep information about the culprit until the very end or like the last episodes. This is the midway point of the season. I'm pretty sure it has 10 episodes, right? Why would they be giving us the possible killer at the midpoint of the show? And if you paid close attention to the ending of this episode, we get a similar structure to the last episode, to episode 4, where we get the cliffhanger at the end, well, where it should be, and we start thinking that we have the killer, and it's not necessarily true. Now, I said in my last video that Bev Mellon being the killer was a misdirect, and it was. I mean, that one was very clear. This one is a little bit more ambiguous, but I still think it would be too obvious to know who the killer is right then and there. Unless that last shot was her escaping or something. Either that or the shot we hear is just a prop gun. Listen, I know I said it was a prop gun last episode, but it made sense. Actually, it wasn't that far off because Bev Mellon, if we believe what she's saying is true, just picked up the gun at the academy and didn't actually think it was loaded, which has the same value as a prop gun. Or did she know it was loaded? Let's get to it. From the beginning of the episode, the first suspect, the writer. Listen, I'm a writer too. I know, shocker. But the imposter syndrome is completely true, and I too have quotes of my favorite authors taped to my walls. I don't have their photographs because I'm not a psychopath, but I get part of it. But the fact that we get the writer's point of view tells me that we will also get the point of view of the sisters and of Bev Mellon, which I'm very excited for, actually, especially the sisters. They're very interesting. And now that we have the footprint clue, I want an explanation. Anyway, this writer's room is filled with clues. One is the photograph he has taped to his mirror. That man is Charlie Kaufman. Who is Charlie Kaufman, you ask? Charlie Kaufman is the writer of the film adaptation. Yes, the title of the episode. Now, if you don't know what this movie is a plot hole. It's what it is. It's a plot hole. Plot hole. Adaptation who? Plot hole. Why is it a plot hole? Because guess who stars in the film? Little Miss Meryl Streep stars in the film alongside Nicolas Cage. Plot hole! But, well, aside the plot hole, adaptation is a film about Charlie Kaufman while he was trying to write the film adaptation of a book, and he was going absolutely bonkers because he was having writer's block and he couldn't write his screenplay. This is a very meta film. Like if you Google ultimate list of meta movies, this will be there for sure. And one other thing that appears in the film is Nicolas Cage's twin. The main character has a twin brother who just mooches off of him in the film, basically, from what I remember. Whether this implies that the writer will have a twin or not, the truth is that this entire season is loaded with twin theory. And this episode is twin theory on crack, basically. Because we get the actors playing our trio, and we get the stunt doubles for the actors playing our trio, and we get a reference to the movie adaptation where there's a twin, and we have the directors who are supposedly twins, and then we have Charles investigating Saz's murder, who is his double, and it's just a bunch of doubles and twin theory, and honestly, at this point, I don't know what to make of this, but if we have to funnel this into something, all of these twins and twin theory and doubles and stunt doubles and whatever, because I mean, there's also Ben Roy. Who is he? Because I mean, there's also Glenn Stubbins. If we have to funnel this, it has to be about Saz's and Charles's relationship, because they were kind of twins, not really, but you understand the sense, because they had a very brotherly, sisterly relationship. And I really hope the adaptation references about that, so that we didn't get a plot hole for nothing. And the second detail we get, I'm sorry if you can hear noise, by the way, it's raining really heavily outside, but the second detail we get is this movie poster. I'm going to read in my notebook. It's a Carlo Ponti production of Michelangelo Antonioni's first English language film, and the poster is of the actress Vanessa Redgrave. She's one of the actors in the film. And then below her image, there's this quote that says, "At love without meaning, at murder without guilt, at the dazzle and the madness of London today," because this movie takes place in London. And the film is called Blow Up and is from 1966, but I think the poster is from 1970. And this is yet another reference to the past and to the 1960s, specifically when the movie came out. And I know you might be asking, Joe, why is the reference to this movie important? Well, what happens in this film? And basically, this follows a male fashion journalist who goes through a bunch of adventures, I guess, in the London underground world, whatever. At one point in the film, he is in the park and he passes by a woman and starts photographing her, and she gets pissed. She gets really mad and starts running after him, and he didn't understand why she was so mad, but he ran away from her and he kept photographing her. Later on, he's looking at the photographs and he sees a man in the bushes with a gun, and he sees another man in the bushes dead. So he accidentally photographed a crime, a murder. But by the end of the film, he gets back to the park and there's nothing there. It's cleaned. So what could this mean? Well, three things, possibly, maybe. Let's see. First one, maybe while the writer was writing this, because we know that he's writing about the podcast since the beginning, because the actors for the film are wearing the clothes that the trio was wearing in season 1. So maybe while the writer was writing this screenplay, he was also researching these people's lives and their crimes, or the crimes they investigated, and he found something out that the trio hasn't figured out yet. But it has to be the same thing that Saz discovered. Right? He stumbled into a crime. Maybe what he found out was the Westies business. Maybe it was something else related to Charles. I don't know. Hypothesis 2. This is related to Saz. Maybe what this movie poster is standing in for is the possibility that Saz, while she was on a ham radio listening to stuff about Charles, maybe just listening for listening. So maybe while Saz was there looking for clues for Charles's investigation, she stumbled upon the business at the West Tower, and whatever is going on there, because I still don't think that's resolved, she found out what it was. Maybe a crime was committed. I don't know. Maybe the Westies murdered Dudenoff and are taking advantage of his apartments, and she stumbled on a crime that had nothing to do with her. And by the time she got there to the apartment, everything was cleaned out, as we see it is right now. Well, apart from Mabel's bed, from Eva Longoria's Mabel's bed. Hypothesis 3. The murder Saz's murder was recorded by someone. Maybe one of the Westies was looking out of the window when they shouldn't have been, and they saw her being shot or something. Maybe this is a clue that will appear later on. That would be so cool. Because remember what I said in my previous episode, that I think the Westies are still not off the hook, and I think they know more than they are saying. But the reason they are not saying it is because they are afraid of losing their homes. So they have a lot at stake. Maybe one of them was recording, maybe even the Christmas all the time guy, because we know he's a TikToker or social media influencer. Maybe he was recording and he recorded what happened or who went there to pick up Saz's body and accidentally recorded a murder. But because the person who did it or who was involved in it was somehow in the know about this apartment business, he couldn't say anything. He had to hide it. That would explain the clue from this poster. It would explain why the Westies are so weird. And it would explain, well, I don't know what else. I'm just excited about this theory. Those are my 3 theories for why this poster is here. So if we're looking at this writer as a suspect, we need to think, well, who did he intend to kill? He wouldn't have killed Charles, obviously, because he's a fan of the podcast and he would want the podcast to continue. And also, he would need Charles to sign his life rights to have his movie made. So if he's a suspect, or if he is the killer, the target is Saz. Because Saz adds some information about the movie that would make the movie impossible to make and would destroy his dreams. Motive. Now we also find out that this writer has a perfect vision. What is a perfect vision good for? Long-range shooting. Just saying. And we don't know if he has any ability with a gun, but if he has a good vision, and plus we figure out eventually later on that he has a good ability with a gun, that is means. Now we need opportunity, because this man supposedly has an alibi. The second suspect we see in this episode is Bev Mellon. I'm gonna say it up front, Bev Mellon looks like the kind of person who pretends to be an idiot on purpose. And I mean, she's a big-time Hollywood producer, no way she's an idiot. Right? Because also, half of what this woman says sounds like a lie. Now, the whole situation with Bev Mellon being there, to me, is not resolved. I still have a lot of questions. First of all, how did she know about that place? Because from what we see in this episode, she didn't know Saz. Because when Saz called Bev, she said, name Saz Pataki. If they knew each other, she would have said, this is Saz, or something like that. It's a pretty unique name that she wouldn't have to say, hello, my name is Saz Pataki. Like, hi girl, it's me, it's Saz. So I'm assuming they didn't know each other. So how did she know about the academy? And why was she there then? At the same time as the trio? I still think she's hiding something and someone sent her there. I mean, if it is true that the sisters are the killers, they probably sent her there. Second question, if the gun truly was there and it was Saz's gun, why was it there and not with her? If Saz thought that she was in such a danger that she would need a gun to protect herself, why wasn't the gun with Saz? Why was it at the academy? And it looks like kind of an old gun. So, could this possibly have been a gun used back then? Back when this place was a location to film Brazos and some crime was committed in the property or in that place that was hidden by the fact that it was being cleaned by the government for something, and they just left the gun there. Because they knew no one was going to be there. It's going to be cleaned and then be left abandoned. That's why Charles even mentioned to Saz that she could use that place because no one was going to use it. So could this be the reason that someone is coming after Charles, or that there is a problem with the film? Because in Charles's past, on Brazos, a crime was committed. And that is the gun. I guess we'll find out because the gun now is with the police and it will probably be analyzed for past crimes and stuff. And because the gun is with the police, we know that this is not the gun that was fired at the end of the episode. Third question about this Bev Mellon situation, why was she so quick to provide an alibi? Is that not suspicious? And also, only murders creators? why was Bev Mellon's alibi in the end credits together with an article about the junk guy? In the episode where we get the theory that one person shot Saz while the other person was in the other building, or the tower rather, to pick Saz up and take her to the furnace. You know, a really strong person, like junk. Why do we see Bev Mellon firing a gun? And why do we hear about junk being so strong in the same episode where their articles appear together at the end credits, in the same episode where a theory about two possible suspects is provided, in the same episode where we discuss the fact one shot Saz and the other one carried her? Why? Why only murders? Why are you putting these ideas that don't make any sense and aren't connected yet into my mind? Anyway, we get another clue that helps us decipher a lot. Saz called Bev Mellon at 11:07 the night she was murdered. And she called Bev Mellon saying the following: "Name Saz Pataki and I'm told you are the one to talk to. Look, I can't get into this in a message, but you need to call me, okay? There's a problem with your Only Murders movie, a big problem, and I can't say more than that." She sent this voicemail like seconds before she was murdered, so this couldn't have been the motive. Or is this problem related to what she was going to tell Charles about, and that's how they knew, because they were listening into the conversations she had with Helga, or whoever she met in New York before she went to meet Charles? Bev Mellon just says, "I don't like to hear bad news, so it took me a long time to get back to her, and by that time she was already dead." Questions about the Saz voicemail. How did Saz have Bev Mellon's phone number? The only connection I can remember between Saz and Bev Mellon is the Lesbian Sisters tournament, golf tournament, which I always assumed the Lesbian Sisters were the brother sisters, right? Am I imagining that, or is that like canon? It is in my mind. So maybe they could have given Saz Bev Mellon's phone number. This is a far-fetched theory, but I will get into it later on in the video because I literally did a timeline of all the events in my table, in my desk. And my second question now is, what the hell happened at the party? Do y'all remember the party at the end of season 3? Where Saz was at, Loretta was at, Howard was at, the trio was at, people from the play was at. Is this correct grammar? I don't think so. Anyway. And I just rewatched it. Dickie was at. Dickie as in Ben's brother, as in Loretta's biological son. Right? Because when we see Saz, when she comes in to the party, she's already decided to tell Charles this very sensitive thing. So was someone at the party that talked to her and made her decide to call Bev Mellon about this film? Now, as a suspect, Bev Mellon does have motive because, I mean, if there was a problem with the film, she would probably lose a lot of money and career status. Does she have the means? I mean, she could probably hire someone. And the opportunity? No, because she has an alibi. Let's hope that the trio confirmed the alibi, but so far she has alibi. Now for the twins. Why do I call them the twins? Anyway, now for the sisters. Before anything else, what the fuck were they carrying in that box? A rifle? The brother-sisters are the current suspects of the crime, and I don't think they did it. In this episode, the trio discovers that the print that was at the Dudenoff apartment belongs to one of the sisters. Now, they wear identical boots, it could belong to either of them. But my problem with this is, why would they reveal the shooter so early on? Either the identity of the shooter is not as big a mystery as the actual reason why Saz was shot, and maybe the shooter, if it is one of the twins, doesn't actually know what Saz knew. They just know that she knew some information about a problem with the film that would literally stop the film from happening, so they had to protect the film and shot her. I think this is a bit far-fetched. If you're going to shoot someone because they're going to stop your film, you at least should know if the problem is actually capable of stopping your film. So theory number 2, she went there for another reason. Maybe even with Saz, because this is where my lunatic theory comes in. What if Saz was investigating whatever is happening with Charles and this led her to the film? Because she went to the golf tournament, and I mean, I'm assuming the lesbian sisters are the brother sisters. Maybe I'm wrong and this makes no sense. But if that tournament was their tournament and Saz went there to talk to them about the film, maybe they befriended each other or they tried to help each other or something like that. And when Saz went to New York to investigate the apartment, they went with her. Or maybe they went there afterwards because maybe they knew the combination, they knew what Saz was up to, and as soon as they knew what had happened to her, they went there to investigate. This doesn't make much sense. I think it makes a lot more sense that one of them was the shooter, but I just think it's early on to find this out, isn't it? Anyway, tell me what you think in the comments. Another thought that came to my mind is, where are they getting their clothes? Because a lot of people that work in Hollywood and in the industry, they just get their clothes from like the production clothes, don't they? Is it possible that the boots they are wearing are boots that simply belong to the film and they just borrow them on the daily and anyone else could have worn them? I guess the twins' motive is the same as Bev Mellon's and the writer, to make sure that the film isn't stopped. They could know how to shoot, I guess, and they are the only ones out of these 3 suspects that don't have an alibi, so they are the most viable suspects. I still don't think they did it. I will get more into it at the end of the video when I finish my timeline explanation. One thing to note is that Glenn seemed to recognize the writer, or maybe he confused him for Mabel, but how are you that blind? What is going on with Glenn that he couldn't recognize that that wasn't Mabel? And why would he think that Mabel would wear a beard? That was a very strange interaction, wasn't it? And speaking of Ben, there was a comment, I will put it in the screen, on one of my last videos about Glenn/Ben, that possibly Ben was the one who was poisoned because he ate the cookie with the rat poison. And then he switched with his stunt double, Glenn, and Glenn was the one that was pushed out of the elevator. Now, this would imply a lot of accent effort on both parts, especially Ben spending all of this time as Glenn, but it would explain the rat fear. Like, why is Glenn so afraid of rats? Is it just a nice Easter egg for the fans, or is there something else there? I don't think Glenn is Ben. That would be really over the top, even for only murders, but I would be delighted if that was the case. Timeline time. Let's go. I'm gonna have to take pictures of my timeline to explain it to you later, but I have it on my table, so I'm gonna analyze it and explain it to you. I basically just wanted to see all the events that happened from the past till now and which ones are relevant to the investigation that we are currently developing in season 4. And to start off in Brazos, because we know this is something related to the past and to revenge, we need to know who was involved in Saz's and Charles' lives back then. In Brazos, which had 9 seasons and is kind of unclear if this was filmed in the 90s or in the 2000s, maybe a bit of both, like Friends. But what we know from Brazos is that this is where Charles met Saz. This is also where Saz got Charles some friends with the poker game. And we have here the reference to tap in. Now, Charles assumes that the reference to tap in is just Saz sending him a message to investigate or something. I've always felt that this was one of the biggest clues, and that she was basically saying or trying to imply that the person who did this, or the business she was investigating, was somehow related to the poker crew. Because we know there were 5 people, 2 guys have been mentioned, and then we know nothing else about it. But I think, I've always thought they were good suspects, the poker crew from way back when. Then we get the information that Saz stole Charles's wife, Cookie. Now, Cookie, I don't think has made an appearance yet, and I cannot wait. And someone commented on one of my videos that Cookie is in the murder board. So I want to see Cookie. And lastly, for Brazos, apart from all the Academy stuff we've discussed, is that Ben Glenroy was cast to play a character in Brazos, and Charles got him fired. Now, we could think that maybe this is Ben's revenge, and Glenn is Ben, and Ben is trying to get revenge on Charles. But what I'm thinking is, if Charles got away with firing a child because he was 8 years old, what else did he get away with? What else could have happened back then that was bad enough for someone to want revenge? And was it related to bakula? Sorry, I will always be mentioning bakula. Always. Now, later on, maybe a few years later, maybe 10 years later actually, when Ben Glenroy was a teenager, he was in a show called Cop Girl. This was a show probably in the late 2000s, 2010s, when Mabel was a teenager, because Mabel was very into Cop Girl and had a crush on Ben Glenroy. Now, the lore of Only Murders between the ending of Cop Girl and the beginning of Only Murders Season 1 has nothing. This is the period of time when I think the Westies started their apartment scheme. It's clear that it's been going on for a few years, so probably started a while before the premiere of Only Murders and the first murder in the building. Then the next important thing to explore is, when did the writer start writing the film, the screenplay for the film? Because he starts writing about the first season. So I'm assuming that he heard about the podcast, he saw everything on the news, and that's when he started writing the screenplay, the adaptation of this podcast for the big screen, after season 1. So he is writing during season 2. Now, season 4 starts right after season 3, and we know that the movie has been in pre-production for a while, so we can assume that during season 3, while they're doing the investigation and the theater and the play and all that, that's when the movie is in pre-production. So somewhere between season 2 and season 3, during the investigation of, what was the woman's, the woman that died at the end of the first season, doing the investigation of her murder, that's when the writer was probably submitting a screenplay, and that's when Bev Mellon was reading the screenplay. So season 2 is submission, reading, getting everything approved, whatever, and season 3 is when they start pre-production. Now, we also know that Saz has been investigating whatever is going on for a while. So Saz's investigation and the pre-production of the film happen at the same time, simultaneously, and also happen at the same time that the trio is investigating Ben Glenroy's murder, and that the play is being rehearsed and all the shenanigans that happened. Everything, all of this is happening at the same time. But how did it start? Well, one of the comments on my video pointed out that Saz last season, after Ben's death, Saz was listening to the ham radio and told Charles some people on the ham radio said they would have preferred to see you dead rather than Ben. I think that's when the investigation started. Saz was listening to the radio, just trying to figure out if this was something harmless or not, because she actually cares about Charles. So she starts her investigation, and she starts to figure out everything that we know that she figured out so far. Everything about the Westies, the Arconia, the dudenoff place, the Ho Hello, and also the stuff that we've seen on her notes that we can't figure out yet, like the numbers or the 2 notes and whatnot. Now, my current theory is that while investigating the ham radio and all this stuff about Charles, she finds out, because she's in LA by this point, she finds out that the movie is happening, that someone is making a movie about Only Murders. Because, I mean, what don't you know when you live in La La Land, right? So she finds out and she's like, okay, this may be important. I need to investigate this. So she goes to the golf tournament with lesbians. That's such a funny sentence. But she goes to the golf tournament and meets the sisters, or even if those aren't the sisters, she probably met someone on the crew or some stunt double, some person that is going to be working on this film. And because Saz has been there for a long time, she has contacts. She meets someone from the film crew. She gets additional information and actually figures out that this might be important for Charles and for Bev Mellon, because at the point where she gets all of this information and she knows what's going on, she knows more than the people in charge. Or at least she doesn't know that the people in charge know, So she has all this information. She's ready to go to New York and maybe see the apartment and not confront Charles, and tell Charles about everything. And that's when she gets shot. Now, this is something I suggested before, that in between her going to the apartment or coming to New York and going to Charles's party, she learns something that makes her go to Charles and tell him about this sensitive thing that she knows. I think that the sensitive issue she was going to talk to Charles about is related to the problem on the Only Murders film. What did she learn? Who did she talk to? Was this part of the conversation with Helga? Was it Helga the one who told her something about the film or Charles that made her decide to go to Charles? Or was the Helga conversation specifically related to the Dudenoff apartment and it was like a side quest? Saz gets shot, season 4 starts, and this is what we've been discussing all along, and we've gotten to the point where we're at. Now, all the suspects we have so far, I think, are red herrings. I don't think they are the people who did it. I think the Westies and the Easties, I can't believe I just said this, but basically the people from the West Tower and the people from the film crew, I think they are two sides of the same coin. Red herrings. The Westies for sure. The film crew maybe. Let's put it like that. So who did it? I have a feeling. I honestly think it goes all the way back to Brazos. I think it has to do with a tap-in reference from Saz, and it has to do with Saz and Charles' shared past and how that past is present in the film crew. Because think about it. Whatever Charles did in Brazos, he probably did a lot of messed up stuff that he got away with. Because, if you get away with firing an 8-year-old child, what don't you get away with? And I think this could be related to the poker crew, to the 5 crew members who were on this poker game, who were also part of the Brazos crew, that could be also part of this new film crew. And this could be the sensitive thing that Saz has to talk to Charles about. Maybe Saz knows what happened back then, and Charles is oblivious to it. Maybe Charles did something that he thought wasn't a problem at all. It was a big problem, but he never found out. But Saz knew, all the way back from the Brazos set. And maybe this person that is related to this thing that happened is currently working on the film crew to get revenge on Charles. Maybe has some damning information about Charles's past or something. And this is the sensitive issue that Saz will be talking to Charles about. And this is the problem, the big problem in the film crew. Because if anything happens to any of those 3 people to damage their image or anything like that, the movie is trash. They can't make it. So that would be a big problem for the movie. And I'm gonna say it. Could it have been bakula? We'll always insist on bakula. But for now, this is my theory. I know it might make no sense, and given that the brother sisters might have done it, this may be complete trash, and I admit that completely. But what if it isn't? It makes sense. Like, come on. If you commented, thank you for commenting, because it made me reflect on a lot of stuff, and comment again because I'm sure, 100% sure, I didn't catch everything and probably my theories are way too delusional, but also this is a place to share delusional theories. We welcome them, we enjoy them, we partake in them. That's it for today. Goodbye, my little pearls.